Hello and welcome to Wilson Center. Now I'm John Molesky. We're going to be joined today by a co-host, something a little different this week. Gwen Young joins us. She is director of our Global Women's Leadership Initiative and the Women in Public Service Project. She joins me as a co-host. Gwen, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, John.
For a very special discussion. We're thrilled to welcome you back to the center. Our guest today is a recent Air Force fellow who moved on to bigger and better things. Colonel Eries Mentzer, now Vice Commander, the newly minted Vice Commander at Joint Base Anacostia, Bolling. Welcome, Eries.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's an honor.
So how's it been going so far? It's been a couple months now, and you must be incredibly busy.
So command is an incredible opportunity. I'm honored to be there. It is not without its challenges, but with every challenge, there is an opportunity. If you don't know much about Bolling, Anacostia, it is a joint base led by the Navy. The Air Force is the position that I serve in, which is the Vice Commander. And we are working through how to combine those two different service cultures, the Navy culture, with the Navy who largely projects power from the sea through their ships, through their subs, aircraft that launch from the sea, and the Air Force who projects power from the installation. And we're bringing those two cultures together and figuring out how to jointly be able to move forward and maximize our resources as a combined mission as opposed to two separate joint missions. So with that can come some challenges when you bring cultures together, but we see it as a great opportunity. There's not really a playbook for joint bases, meaning that a lot of the things we anticipated, whether it was joint personnel systems or joint communication systems, those have not yet been developed. So we have a great opportunity to really figure out what's the best way to lead a joint base, and I really think that the things that we're doing at Joint Base Anacostia Bolling may set the tone for other joint bases in the Department of Defense.
Establish the best practices.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. What from the outside looking in, we'd assume U.S. military, two different branches, they work together in the theater. What are the challenges? Specifically, what are the areas that are most difficult?
I think the challenge is just how we prioritize things within our culture. And we talked a little bit about how the Air Force projects power from their bases, and so we tend to put a lot of emphasis on how we invest in our installations. The Navy projects power from the sea, so they tend to put a lot of emphasis in their resourcing on the sea. And so those are slightly different cultures, and so we're just trying to figure out how we do that with the base that we have. Largely our mission there at Joint Base Anacostia Bolling is to support our 48 mission partners. We've got mission partners from every service, from multiple agencies that either live, work, or play on Joint Base Anacostia Bolling. We have about 1,000 housing, privatized housing that we manage there on the base. And so we're just trying to figure out with the resources we have, how do we create those environments for all of those mission partners, for all those different service members. We've got the Coast Guard that's there, how we create the environment for all of those missions to excel.
Does proximity to the Pentagon make the job easier or more difficult?
I would say it doesn't make it more difficult or easy. We have many members that live on our base that have missions at the Pentagon. So for them, we all deal with the challenge of commuting in Washington D.C. But they choose to live there. But for us, we've got several bases here in the National Capital Region. Some of those are missions that are Pentagon missions that are at some of these installations on these bases or on some of these installations. And so I think for us, it's just an opportunity for us to figure out how we can best support them.
So clearly we're interested in this, but the main reason we've invited you here is Gwen's area of expertise. You are golden because you are a living example of women achieving this leadership that your program is all about. So we want to talk about you. Gwen, what do you want to talk about?
Well, it's interesting you said, there is no playbook for a joint base like this, and you are the vice commandant on this, but you are also the first woman vice commander of this base. Tell me, what's that like? Is that a tone that's been created, or does it feel different? How do people react to the woman vice commander of the base?
I've had many different reactions. One morning I was walking to my building, there was a gentleman who's been with our base for about 30 years, and he does a lot of our ground maintenance for the base. And he was, putting in these beautiful flowers outside of our building. And I just walked in and I said, "Hey, good morning, how are you?" And he looked at me and he started to tear up. And he said, "You're the first woman, not just of my grade, but also I look like him, of my diversity, that he's seen at our base." And for him, it was just a very proud moment for him. He said, "Can I bring my daughters to meet you? And how did you get here?" And for him, it was, for his daughters and his granddaughters, he's a been with our base about 35 years, he saw me as a symbol of hope, right? An opportunity that maybe his daughters and granddaughters could have at one period in time. And it was just a very emotional moment for me just to have that conversation with him.
How do you manage that? I mean, you're going to be this to people. You're going to be a symbol. You're breaking down barriers, race and gender. How do you go about a really busy job that has a lot of nitty-gritty things you have to delve into and be aware of that big picture?
You know, the Air Force has provided incredible training. I've been in the service about 21 years now, and they've put me through, technical training, through leadership training, through different experiences that prepared me for this moment. And I just, as I talk about that, I kind of think to a conversation I just had with my son. He's in the 3rd grade, and my son's got these really thick eyelashes, and which I think are beautiful. And some of the young men, that he interacts with in his before and after school programs and sporting programs, they kind of tease him a little bit about these thick eyelashes. And the thing I said to my son is, you can't blend in when you're meant to stand out. And so I recognize that being, the first, I hope I'm not the last, but maybe it shows, I said the same thing to myself, well, I don't want to make my command about the fact that I'm the first female vice commander. I do want to make it about, how do we show others, whether they look like me, whether they're, my same race or my same gender, that there is opportunity if you
So
apply yourself.
You're not shying away from it.
Not at all. And, I've had many opportunities to communicate with diverse groups, whether that's, I was with some college students recently. I got to go down and spend some time with the elementary school right outside of Joint Base Anacostia Bolling in Anacostia. And really, it's just about sharing what my experience has been, all of my experience. And that means, some of the things the barriers I've had to overcome, the people that I've connected with that have helped me find a path forward, the connections I've made. We've talked about, I love the concept of the hive, where, I just keep building these kind of networks and swarming intelligence to figure out how to move forward. Often, I think people sometimes look at positions of success and think it was an easy path, and that they must have had an easy path to get there. Yeah. And all of us face some kind of challenge or adversity, and I think the more I am authentic and can be vulnerable and share some of those challenges, it makes it more achievable for others. It makes it seem like it's more possible to attain, whether it's their goal is to be a commander or their goal is to be a colonel in the Air Force. They realize that anybody can do this. It's just how you navigate the process and who's part of your team to help you achieve that goal.
I'd like to hear a bit more about that, because we had worked together in the past, and I've met some of the women and the women leaders. But as you're rising, who was the sort of person you looked forward as maybe the role model, and who are some of the people that were your team that helped you advance? You've been rising as a first on several levels and the youngest to become a colonel in the Air Force, as I understand. Who helped you get to where you were and where you are?
I wasn't the youngest to become a colonel in the Air Force, but I moved along a little quick. But I've had several people along the way, and I probably would really start with my mom, right? So that's the development, the foundation is set in the home. And I feel like my mom, I was one of 5, and I was the only child to go in the military. My father was served in the Navy. And I never saw that as a path for me. In fact, I was the child that most rejected, I think, military service.
Where were you in the birth order?
I was the middle child. And, I was the child most resistant to relocation. Every time we picked up and moved.
You were the one who did not want to.
I did not want to move. I actually made picket signs at one point and when we were relocating and didn't want to go.
A leader from a young age.
A leader, But the resilience my mom showed throughout my father's 26-year military career in reestablishing herself every time we moved, because it was very difficult for her to have a career, while my father's military career moved literally from coast to coast. We went back and forth it seemed like from the East Coast to the West Coast in most of his duties. And so it started right there with, the strength that she showed and the resilience she showed and how she continued to try and navigate through her circumstances to become who she wanted to be. And, she gave us just the right amount of, I think, balance of tough love and soft landings. Raising 5 kids, for the most part on your own, when you're, father's flying or he's out to sea. You've got to really figure out how. We were very 5 rambunctious kids. And again, at the time today, they would probably have medicated us. But at that time,
taking your own path.
We each took our own path. And so just how she did that and also continued to find ways for to utilize her talents and continue to achieve. That was really the first example. And then along the way, you know, probably one of the greatest mentors I have is my husband. And he himself is a military brat, spent most of his life growing up overseas. And, you know, he literally has created himself from being the guy who was chalking fields at Ramstein Air Base, you know, 26 years ago, 25 years ago. And today he, you know, oversees military spouse employment and child development for all of the Department of Defense. You know, he is, you know, just, you know, last week he was at the White House advocating for military families. And the idea that he did that and, you know, has really inspired me to see what he's done with his career.
What made you eventually sort of go to the military? If you were saying, you know, I was picketing the moving and it was sort of the last career that I was thinking about. What?
No full-time jobs as a protester.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. The protester don't get paid as well. What were you thinking? I mean, what sort of finally, what attracted you originally to be coming into the military?
So it was interesting. You know, I was at, I was in college and I was on a scholarship, and some life circumstances happened with me personally, with my family, and for a series of reasons, I relocated and went to a different school. And at the new school, I did not have a full education. My education wasn't provided for. And I began to work full-time, work part-time, and then carry a full academic load trying to make it work. And when I realized that was not possible, I'd either have to, you know, assume some debt, or I'd have to slow pace on my, my educational path. I started looking at options, and Air Force IRTC was offering an opportunity for me to take on a scholarship and in return to just serve 4 years on active duty. And, you know, I think if you talk to some of my classmates back at ROTC, I wasn't the most inspiring cadet because at the time I didn't see it as a calling or a commitment. You know, I saw it as almost like a toll booth, somewhere where I had to pay my dues to get to where I needed to go. And
when did it click for you that it was more than that?
Exactly.
It was at Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany. I had the pleasure and privilege of working for Colonel Mike Stickney and Chief Frank Levand and Master Sergeant Kerry Schaff, who was a leadership team there at Spangdahlem. And on my first day on duty, those gentlemen, along with Staff Sergeant Shauna Bynum, who was our NCO, sat me down in a conference room. And on a whiteboard, they drew my mission here in the 52nd Component Repair Squadron, and then the mission in the group, and then the mission of our wing in Spangdahlem, the 52nd Fighter Wing. And they kept going all the way up to the National Defense Strategy. And they linked that to why the duties that I were doing were so important. And for the first time for me, I thought, wow, like this service, this wearing this uniform means something.
The light bulb went on.
And service really matters. And it just kind of was like, wow. And then not long after that, you know, some of the first fighter jets that launched after 9/11 launched from our base. And, you know, and you recognize the importance of creating those environments for all of those airmen at that base to excel.
No longer an extraction, it's real life.
And my role that I played in that, you know, and it was so powerful. And, you know, to this day, I reach back to those gentlemen and to Shauna Bynum. In fact, I got to go down to San Antonio and retire Shauna Bynum from service and reach back to them to kind of share my experience and get that guidance. Because for me, that was that blowing moment that our Chief of Staff talks about, where you realize, you know, the importance of what you do and how important the influence you have on others.
So you mentioned earlier that you see the value in sharing candidly the difficulties you've encountered, the challenges you've encountered. So we're running short on time, and I could go on forever, and I know Gwen could too. But we don't want to let this end without you giving some pointers to people who find themselves in a similar situation of you, particularly women, since that's what we're talking about, in making your way through, navigating through your climb. What are the most important lessons that you took away?
I would say first, be authentic. You know, when you share what some of your challenges are, you'd be surprised how many people are willing to kind of come around you and help. The Air Force
You're talking also about being vulnerable?
Being vulnerable. You know, the Air Force is all about teams. And I'll use an example of when I first had my son. I'm in the Pentagon and I was in a very intense job at the moment. I was helping to shape the force management programs for the Air Force. This is where we were deciding the people that we would have to let go because we didn't have enough. We needed to make some hard choices about where we were spending our money, and we were making some cuts to personnel. And I was helping to lead that on a team at the time. Well, I just had a baby while we had all these very, you know, important meetings and briefings and everything going on that I was largely responsible to develop. I was also trying to figure out how to nurse, right? How to, you know.
Really honestly.
Thank God the Pentagon has 8 nursing rooms in the Pentagon, so it's fabulous. But at first, I worked with all males, and I was trying to almost hide. Couldn't give me nurses, but I was trying to hide what I was doing, you know. And
pretend like you didn't have to
pretend like I didn't have to do it, and kind of be vague about about what I was doing. And the first time that I kind of shared that, it just kind of opened up a whole new world, because then they became advocates for me, and they would actually like grab the phone like, no, you have to go, right? This is the time you're leaving. And or they would, like, hey, they would bring me back water sometimes, like, you haven't drank enough water today. Like, they actually
it's great to hear
became
they were that
part of a
supportive.
team. There was a supportive environment. And so just be vulnerable and share what's going on. And people are willing to help you. Another thing I would say is, in my entire career, it's never been just me, right? So a great friend of mine, Evelyn Ligon, I think we talked about this before, her grandmother helped to overturn the voting tax in Virginia. And, her grandmother used to always talk to her about don't go it alone. And in my entire career, I haven't had to do that. So whether it was, I have the most amazing spouse who has been, made so many sacrifices in his career to allow me to serve, whether it has been the group of girlfriends, right, that you can pick up the phone and call anytime. And in fact, like in command, there's 5 of us like on an app where we can just put questions really quick, and one of the 5 of us always has the answer. So it's like you don't have to figure it out on your own. It was great mentors. I had the opportunity to work for our current Chief of Staff, General David Goldstein, for a few years, and all the lessons that I learned through him being one of the most amazing leaders I've had the privilege to serve for, and how he brought me in on decision making, how he would share with me his processes of how he got to things, and just watching the amazing, not just officer that he was, but gentleman, and how he approached issues in the Air Force, and how he approached building relationships with our counterparts, and how he used to always talk about tending the garden. You have to build these relationships, and you have to continue to invest in them, and that's where you kind of get your strength and your knowledge. All of those things, having a hive of people, whether it's the group of parents that we've all come together, and we contracted our own bus to get our kids back and forth to school when the DOD didn't have a solution for that. We can't depend on them. We needed to make it work so that we could serve. We did that ourselves. Those are all hives that I've built, and you just kind of swarm of knowledge and intelligence, and through that
And now you're the Queen Bee.
I don't know about that.
I really sincerely wish we had more time. I'm ill-equipped to quote the Bible directly, but paraphrasing, there's this great passage about we've all been warmed by fires we didn't build, or have drunk from wells we didn't dig. It's nice to hear someone actually gets that. Some people don't understand that, and so thank you for sharing those stories with us, Eries. It's great to have you back in the building. I think I said this to you when you were leaving. You really set the bar high for future Air Force fellows, and your current post proves that. Commander Mentzer, thank you. Gwen, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.